Hi, welcome to transferring SaaS application data securely with Amazon AppFlow. My name is Eric Johnson. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a principal developer advocate for serverless at AWS. I've been a solutions architect and a developer for many years. I'm a father of 5 and a husband of 1. My loves are serverless, of course, music, drums, pizza, and Dr. Pepper, among other things. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at EDJGeek. You'll hear a lot about serverless and music and drums and pizza and Dr. Pepper. Look forward to seeing you there. For today's agenda, we're going to talk about an introduction to Amazon AppFlow, integrations that are available, the security built into Amazon AppFlow, scheduling flows, customizing flows, use cases for Amazon AppFlow, and then a demonstration of setting up an Amazon AppFlow flow. All right, so let's get started with an introduction to Amazon AppFlow. And before we jump in, a critical question I want to ask you is, where is your critical business data? When we have data that we use for making decisions with our business, that data is often located in one of many different places, either in SaaS services or AWS services, or on a computer under your desk or something like that. Data is siloed in a lot of different places. But the real question is, where do you want your business data? And the dream idea is to have this data centralized in a place where we can run queries, where we can pull out information to help us make the right choices when we're making choices for our business. And this is what we created Amazon AppFlow for. Amazon AppFlow is a fully managed integration service that enables you to transfer data securely between SaaS providers and AWS services without the need for code. So let's go back to our data. And this is kind of our dream world, but the reality is we have these different silos. But with Amazon AppFlow, what we're able to do is we can create flows from a SaaS service going into Amazon AppFlow, and we can transfer data to AWS services as the targets. So the SaaS is the source and the Amazon AWS services are the targets. Additionally, we can route data back to another SaaS service or the same SaaS service. So you have a lot of flexibility in how to route data securely from services to services to get the data where you need to make decisions based on data, right? So educated decisions based on your business data. So let's talk about some of these integrations that Amazon AppFlow supports. There are 16 SaaS integrations and 5 AWS service integrations. And you can see here we have Amplitude, Dynatrace, Datadog, Google Analytics, InfoNexus, Marketo, Salesforce and Salesforce Pardo, ServiceNow, Singular, Slack, communications there, Snowflake, Trend Micro, Upsolver, Viva, and Zendesk. So there's a lot of different options for managing services, for managing communications, security, machine learning, analytics, you name it, it's out there. And so you're able to use these services together. For the AWS service integrations, we have Amazon Simple Storage Service, or also known as S3, Amazon EventBridge, Amazon Redshift, Amazon Lookout for metrics, and Amazon Honeycode. Now, you're not limited to these 5. These are the 5 that are directly integrated. But as you know, if you've used AWS services at all, if I get data into a simple, an S3 bucket, I can then use that data in any number of places. The same with like an Amazon EventBridge. I can put events onto a bus that I can act on, analyze, react to whatever downstream with different services. So there's a lot of flexibility as you're moving data around. Now, how you choose your source and your target is you'll actually choose a source, like in this example, maybe Salesforce or one of the other ones. And then based on that source you select, contextually, you're presented with destinations. So logical places where this type of data can move to. So you have a lot of flexibility there, and it will walk you through how to set those up. All right, so we talked about the integrations, but the first thing we want to wrap our head around is, how is this secure? How do we make this secure for you? So when you set up a flow, the first thing you're going to do is a connection. All flows start with a SaaS connection. So I can go in here, I can choose what kind of connection I want to do. I want to do a Salesforce connection. I want to connect to Slack, and it'll kind of walk you through there, instructions on how to set that up. In the Salesforce example, it uses an OAuth authentication. And so what happens is the connection maintains that authentication information. And then different services have different mechanisms for this. So when you make that connection, you complete it, then the connection secrets are encrypted with an AWS Key Management Service key and stored in AWS Secrets Manager. Then when you delete a connection, all this metadata is deleted as well. So encryption going on, stored in the Secrets Manager. Now, as far as security at rest or encryption at rest, when you transfer data to S3, which will be a very common place to move it to because it's often a staging ground to do other things with data, right? So when you move the data to S3, it's going to be encrypted using either an AWS managed key or customer managed key. So again, that data is encrypted. Encryption in transit, we use Transport Layer Security, TLS, 1.2 for all communications. And really interesting here is you can use an AWS private link for private data transfer when possible. So what this means is, if I'm connecting to a service, normally if I'm connecting to a SaaS service, I would connect to it over the internet, right? Or I would go to Google Analytics, I would go to Slack, I would go to something else, and it goes over the internet. However, many of these services offer an endpoint on the AWS network through the use of an AWS private link. Services like Salesforce, Singular, Snowflake, and Trend Micro all offer this AWS private link. So what happens is when you connect to those, you do not leave the AWS network, you stay on the private network. Again, an extra added layer of security. And then we have the encryption in transit intermediary storage. So it's kind of this mix of encryption in transit and encryption at rest. Well, what happens is, even if you aren't pointing to an S3 bucket as your target, one of the services, if you're moving from one service to another, there's a good chance that we may save that data as an intermediary storage in an Amazon S3 bucket. Again, we encrypt it with an AWS managed or customer managed key. And then once the data is transferred out, the bucket is deleted up to 7 days afterwards. So at no point is the data not encrypted, whether in transit or at rest, as well as your authentication is wrapped around that. So we build a lot of security into Amazon AppFlow. So let's talk about what it looks like to actually schedule a flow. Now we're going to build a flow in the demo, but I want to kind of get some concepts around how do we schedule. We've talked about the integrations, we've talked about setting up these flows, but how do we invoke a flow? How do we start a flow? And there's different ways of doing that. Okay, several different ways you can do it is you can run on demand, you can run flow on a schedule, or you can run a flow on an event. So let's talk about on-demand flows. These, it is right in the title. They run as needed. They run on demand. So you literally go into the console, you can push run flow, or you can call an AWS CLI command and you can start the flow, as well as an AWS SDK, so you can call it through the API. And when you run a on-demand flow, it transfers all the data from the source to the target. So you're grabbing what you're saying each time is, hey, and these are usually used for like one-offs or very rarely run. I'm going to grab all the data, I want to put it into my target, and I want to work with it. So the next type you have is an event-triggered flow. And this has to be, the service has to support events. So for example, we'll take Salesforce. With Salesforce, you can choose a type of event you want, an account change event, an asset change event. There's all kinds of events being emitted from Salesforce that can actually invoke a flow. So it runs when the specified event occurs in the SaaS service, and then it transfers the changed data. So you're going to get the deltas. If it says, hey, this account was changed, then that account's going to be sent to you. It's not going to send all the data you already have. It's just going to send those changes. And again, it's only available with SaaS services that provide events. And finally, we have the scheduled triggered flows. And what you're able to do here is you can do full or incremental updates. And to do a full transfer, you have to do at least daily or greater. You can't do a full incremental update every minute. You don't want to hammer away like that. So what you can do is if it's daily or more, then you can do a full or you can do an incremental update or a full update. Anything less than daily, you want to just do incremental updates. When you do an incremental update, the very first one you do is going to pull the last 30 days of data by default. You can actually configure this for more or less time. But if you set up to say, hey, I want you to run this every day, for the next, I don't know, however, for the next 70 days, right? So what it'll do is it'll start the very first run, it'll grab the last 30 days, and then it'll grab incremental moving forward. It's important to note that each check for a new data is considered as an invoked flow, right? So when you check it, that's going to be an invoked flow when we talk about pricing, things like that. All right, so with that repeat schedule, you have flexibility when you're setting this up. You can do it from every minute to a monthly schedule or even a one-time flow. You can schedule a one-time flow to happen next week, right? You have a start and end date and times, depending on the type of flow or type of schedule you're using. You can choose days of the week. So if I do weekly, I can say, hey, do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or just every Saturday or something like that. And then you can also choose, if you choose a monthly, you can choose days of the month. You can say, hey, I want you to do it the last day of the month. I want you to do it the last weekday of the month, or the first day of the month, or the first weekday of the month. So there's a lot of flexibility in this when you're setting up schedules and how you want to pull that data. There's also a thing called the offset option when you're using scheduling. And this is important to understand. With some of the services that you're working with, you might have some latency happening in how they're time-stamped. So for example, maybe when you're doing your daily pull and you're saying grab it by this date or something like this, it's going to look at that timestamp. And if your service may do some action against that data, and the timestamp may not happen until maybe another 30 seconds later or another 5 minutes later or whatever. So depending on the service you're using, there might be some latency written in there. So you can actually offset your data pull to include that. And you want to set your offset time as greater than or equal to the SaaS service latency. So let's explain that. Let's kind of dig into this. Let's say you're going to do a call for data. You're going to do an incremental data and you want to do it this could be daily, monthly, minutely, whatever. It's just a set schedule. So let's say time 0, time 1, time 2, time 3, so on and so forth. So what happens is you're going to have this offset you set. We'll just call it O for the moment, but it could be 5 seconds. It could be 30 minutes, however you want to set that. So when the first run happens, it's going to take, and if you keep the default of 30 days, that very first run is going to go back based on the timestamp you set. It's going to go back, and the T0 is going to be, or I'm sorry, the first record is going to be T0 minus 30 days, right up to T0 minus the offset. Okay, so it's not going to come right up to the time. So if you're at 10 a.m. and your offset is 10 minutes, it's actually going to pull everything up to 9:50 a.m. It's going to be that T0 minus the offset. Then the next pull that happens is going to be T1 minus 0 is going to be the ending point, and the beginning point is going to be T0 minus the offset. So it's going to catch that offset, so it's going to stagger your pulls back, and again, in our example, 10 minutes, right? So that's what will happen is that way, if your system is adding timestamps after the fact, or there's latency, they'll be collected in the next call. And then it happens, so on and so forth, as you can see there, all the way up to T3, and it's going to pull from T2 minus offset up to T3 minus offset. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions or pop questions into the channel, and our moderators are going to try to help you out with that as well. When you're working with your offset times, remember your offsets can be longer than the scheduled interval. So if your interval is an hour, they can be a 3-hour offset. So you can really set that out, but it can't be more than 10 hours. So that offset must be less than 10 hours. And the default value is 0. So if you don't set an offset, it's going to go with exactly the times that you have in there for your scheduled increments. All right, so let's talk about the data itself. So we've talked about these, these flows and how do we schedule them, what's the security wrapped around them. Let's talk about the data itself and how it comes in. And there's multiple ways of kind of manipulating that data as it goes through an AppFlow flow. The first is mapping fields. And you need to do this. Obviously, you're going to say, hey, I want to map these fields, but you have some flexibility on how this works. You can choose which fields are retrieved from the source. So these are actually part of the query when we query the services, right? You can map to field names in the target. So you bring them across. And then you can manually map fields or upload a .csv file with map fields. So if you have, let's say you're doing, there's 80 fields here in this example that we're doing, or somewhere right there. And if you're doing this constantly, you're building different flows, a good idea is to set up a CSV file that maps those for you. And so you can just upload that CSV file each time. The other option is you can say, hey, just grab everything. And in our demo, I'll kind of show you how to do that and how you walk through that. So mapping the fields chooses which fields you want to come from the source and get put into the destination. The second way of manipulating data is through filters, right? And these filters are used in building the query to fetch data from the source. So this will happen before you actually make the call for the data. It helps identify, hey, this is the data we want. Okay, so you can do multiple criteria within a single filter, and those are treated as an OR. So you can see here where I'm saying, hey, I want the created date should be on or is on 5/8/2021, or it can be on 5/15/2021. Now, you also have multiple filters you can use, and these are combined with an AND. So if I'm saying it has to meet these, it can create a date is on 5/8/21 or 5/15/21, and the field name deleted must be false. So that record cannot have been deleted, right? Which is something when in some of the services you may get a record and it was actually deleted, but they've kept it for historical data, right? And then the filters are also contextually based on data type. So if you have text, then you can say, it must match this. If it's numbers, you could say it must be greater than this or less than this. If it's dates, you can do between. So there's a lot of flexibility, and again, it's contextual based upon the data type of the field you are filtering upon. The next way to manipulate data is through validations. Now, validations are run after the data is pulled down. So we've done our query, we've got the data down. Now we need to look at that data and make sure that we're getting good data. This is kind of you want to get rid of your bad actors here, right? So this checks for bad data like missing values, zero values, negative values, so on and so forth. And you can also use multiple validations here. They are treated as OR. So you can say the account name. If the account name has values or missing or null, then ignore the record, right? Or if, in this example, the master record ID values are missing or null, then terminate the flow. And that means, hey, I may have something bigger going on, so I'm going to terminate the flow. All right. The next way of modifying values is the modify values, right? So you can actually change your values as they come in. These can be applied at the field level. And this allows you to either mask values or truncate values. And we'll show in the demo on how to do that. But basically, I can say, look, hide the data in this. So this is great if you're using it for test data and you need to, clean that up. So you can do that. And then you can truncate if you need to just get partial values. So those are the two types of options. The final way for configuring your data as it comes down and changing it is through what's called a formula. And this can be applied to two fields. What this allows you to do is you can combine two fields, and you can, text fields can be concatenated, number fields can be combined by adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, or also concatenating. Again, it's contextual on the data type. And it allows you to take the value of two fields, do some type of formula on it, and then output that data to a third field. So in this example, I'm taking the billing longitude and the billing latitude, and I'm creating one single field called lat long that I might use somewhere else to pull some, geo information. Finally, you can configure your data output configurations. This isn't really manipulating the data that's going in, but you can configure how it's output for your use. And you have several different choices. Your data format, you can do JSON, CSV, or Parquet. And I may be saying that wrong. Parquet. Your aggregation, you can choose not to aggregate, or you can aggregate all the records, combine all the records into one file per flow run. You can change the file name with a timestamp or not. And then you can change the folder structure. So you have, depending, and so you want to kind of think about this. Where is the data going? How am I going to use that? And that helps me decide how I want to format the output of the data. All right, so let's talk about some use cases. We've talked about kind of walking through how AppFlow works and the different configuration choices you can make. But let's look at some reasons why you would use AppFlow. Well, the first one is like a customer 360. And this idea is I want to get a 360 view of what a customer looks like. What does their journey look like with my company? And so let's say I'm using Salesforce, Marketo, and Zendesk. So I can pull all that data in. This would be 3 separate flows, one to pull from Salesforce, one to pull from Marketo, one to pull from Zendesk, and I can have it drop that data into Amazon Redshift. Then I can start pulling information and making business decisions based on what kind of, am I seeing some similarities in my support and is my marketing, how does that travel through the funnel? So a lot of flexibility there in getting a wider range or a broader view of what the customer's journey looks like and really be customer focused. The next one would be data enrichment. And these are just a few. There are a ton of use cases for this, but let's say you're, again, using this same setup, Salesforce, Marketo, and Zendesk, and we can obviously do it with other ones, but this same idea is I can pull this data in and I can drop it, instead of going to Redshift, I can drop it into an Amazon S3 bucket. And then that bucket, I can then do some machine learning with SageMaker against it, making some assessments on that data, and then output that data into an output bucket, output that enrichment. And then I can take from S3 and I can pipe that right back into Salesforce through Amazon AppFlow. So I'm able to enrich the data and say, okay, and that could go somewhere else, but Salesforce is kind of that, let's say that's my central hub of my customer's story. And so as that data is being enriched, I can put that back into Salesforce. There's also stuff as simple as I'm going to sync 2 separate Salesforce organizations. I'm going to take data and I'm going to put it into Amazon AppFlow, and I'm going to take it to another Salesforce. I might put it in S3 to do that. So this is just a way. So this is hey, I have my sales organization, I have my marketing organization, and I want to sync data, but they have their own Salesforce instances. And here's one I was thinking of that I thought might be kind of cool is if you had, let's say I want to take my customer sentiment. What is my customer thinking? And I'm going to look at communication. I'm going to look at my support information coming in. I'm going to look at maybe communication with customers via Slack. And I'm going to bring that into Amazon AppFlow, and I'm going to put it in an input bucket or an S3 bucket. And then I'm going to look at it with Amazon Comprehend. And I'm going to see, hey, are they happy? Are they sad? Again, there's different examples of what you can do with this, but being able to move that data around, and we said this right at the beginning, but being able to move that around without code. And I'm going to show you in the demo here in just a second. I'm not going to do one snippet of code. I'm just simply going to point and click a little bit. And set up these flows. So again, these are different use cases that you can do with AppFlow. All right, so let's jump into a demo. So with this demo, we're going to create a workflow that connects to Salesforce, and it drops data into an Amazon S3 bucket. Just kind of show you how to set that up and what that looks like. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new flow. And in here, I'm going to give it some flow details, simply name it. So I'm going to go, and you can laugh at my typing. You'll see me make a lot of mistakes here. So I'm the fat finger king. So here we go. So what we're going to do is we're just going to call this my Salesforce. Did I misspell? Oh, I did. See, there it is. Okay, my Salesforce demo. Okay. And we don't need a description at the moment. I'm okay with data encryption. I'm going to use the AWS managed key. So I don't need to customize that at the moment. I'm okay without tags. So we're going to go next. And now I'm going to choose a source name. Okay, so what I want to do is say, where's that data coming from? And again, these are all those services that we talked about. And I'm going to go Salesforce. And now it says I don't have a connection, so I'm going to go ahead and do a connect. And I'm going to connect to a product account, or I'm sorry, production account that we've got. I'm going to call this my SF connection. There we go. I'm going to hit continue. And what it's going to do is it's going to come up. Now I've already put my credentials in, so you don't have to see that. But I'm going to allow this connection. And that just got stored in my, my secrets manager. So that data is now encrypted and stored. So I'm going to do this with the objects. We're not going to do events right now, although I want to show you events. You can see here's different events that can happen. But we're going to go ahead and do objects. And it's going to ask me for an object type. And I'm going to choose account. So I'm going to work with my account objects at the moment. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide where I want it to go. And you can see here contextually, here's the different places I can send it. Right from Salesforce, I can go to Zendesk or Upsolver or Snowflake or back to Salesforce. So I'm going to go to Amazon S3 for the moment. And I'm going to choose a bucket, my AppFlow demo bucket, which I already built. And then I'm going to throw on a prefix called demo. Now, real quick here, we're going to go over to my S3. And you can see here, here's that bucket, and it is empty. We'll do a refresh. So it is empty. There's nothing there. Okay, so now that I've got that, it's going to tell me here's the link to here's my S3 URL. Now I'm going to do some additional settings. In here, this is where I can actually set that data that I was talking about. How do I want to output that data? Do I want to aggregate it or not? I'm happy with JSON right now. I'm going to leave it at no aggregation. I'm good with all the defaults at the moment, but I want you to see this. And then finally, the flow trigger. We could do a flow on schedule. Here's all those settings I talked about. Real quick, we can do our repeats weekly, and you can see those days. You have all kinds of flexibility. For the apps, for this, we're going to do run on demand. You may be asking, hey, why is that run flow on event grayed out? That's because we didn't choose an event trigger when we set up the Salesforce. We said we were going to do it through an object. So I'm going to do run on demand, and I'm going to go next. Next thing I'm going to do, now I can map my fields. Okay, so I can upload a CSV, but we're not going to do that. We're going to manually map the fields. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say choose your field. And I'm actually going to go ahead and map all the fields directly. I'm going to have it do the work for me. I could go in one by one and do it. I'm good with pulling them all over for the moment. All right, so one of the things I want to do, now that I've set this up, we're going to change a couple things. First of all, I've got this phone number coming in here. I don't want people to see that phone number. There are probably other data we can block out, but just an example. So I'm going to modify this value. And I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say, I want you to mask that value. And I want all values masked. So I'm going to save that. And so now that phone number is going to be masked. I can go into additional settings on this as well. And this isn't just for this field, this is actually for all the maps. But we can say, since I'm mapping all of them, I want it to go ahead and import newly added fields. If there's a new field added there, I want it to get added here automatically. I don't want it to go up and update this. I also want deleted records. I want to do some historical things, see what's going on. You don't have to do that, but you can. All right, so the other thing I want to do, now that we've modified that phone, is we're going to go, and I have a thing called owner ID. And in the owner ID, I want to mask, or not mask that, but I want to actually truncate that. I don't want all of that coming through, so I'm going to truncate that. I'm good to go to 5 characters. And there we go. So now I've masked and I've truncated some stuff. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is I also have some information that I want to change out as well. I want to create a field. So I have account ID and I have account name. And I want one field that has account and name that I might export for some other reporting that I'll do. So I can add a formula for these, and I'm going to choose concatenate. Remember, if those were numbers, I would get some other options like adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division. And I actually want my ID first and my name second. So I'm going to set that up, and I'm going to call this a really clever name. I'm going to call it ID name, and I'm going to go ahead and map with this formula. So what happened is, and it's going to be on the last page because it adds a new field. I have a new field called ID-name that's going to have the ID and the name in it, so that I can use that for later reporting. Okay, so we've got that. Let's add some validations. We want to make sure that all the data coming in is as we want it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in here, and I have a thing called account type. And that needs to be there. So we're going to say if the value is missing or null, you see null there, then ignore that record. I could terminate the flow, but I still want the information. Just, ignore those records. I only want ones that have an account type. All right, so let's go next. The next thing I can do is I can add a filter. And in this filter, I actually want to create, I just want last year. I want all of 2020. So I'm going to find my date that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the create date. And I'm going to say is between. And notice this is contextual again. It recognizes that as a date field. So it says, okay, we can do some math on that. So, or some evaluation of that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say everything from, wait, Eric's getting crazy. January 1st all the way to December 31st. I'm going to hit next. And there's our flow. My Salesforce demo. I'm using the AWS KMS managed key. I don't have any tags on it at the moment. It shows my source and my source details and my destination details. How I'm going to trigger it, and that's on demand. And all the mapped fields are here. Go through it, including that last one. So we can go ahead and create the flow. So I'm going to create that. And that was created. Now I can run the flow. And the flow came back successfully. So now what I can do, it shows me actually the bucket it's in. So I can click that to open it, but we've already got it open over here. So I'll go ahead and refresh this. And I now have a folder called demo, because I put that. Here's my Salesforce demo. And here's my data. And I have 16 kilobits of data that's pulled down. It's going to be in a JSON format. And there's working data. So let's take a look at this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go in here. I'm going to download it. Now, normally you wouldn't do this because you're working with it with other services. But I'm going to go ahead and download this, and then I'm going to do some work that you can't see in the background here. All I'm doing is I'm adding a .json to this so I can open it. And we can see here. I'll pull this over real quick so you can see it. Bring that. So now here you can see in here where I've got, so let's look at our phone number real quick. Our phone is masked out. Okay. Our owner ID is only 5 characters long. And we have a new field called ID name. And it's got the two put together. And with that, you have a working version of an AppFlow that pulls from Salesforce to Amazon S3. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. If you have any questions, our moderators are here. I'm also going to try to answer some live, time allowing. And as we do that, I would encourage you to look at, if you want more information like this and other videos will be on our Serverless Land website at serverlessland.com. Again, I'm Eric Johnson. You can find me at EDJ Geek on Twitter. I'm glad to help you out. I really appreciate you visiting and watching this. And now let me answer some questions for you.